on, everyone? James 99% and welcome back to another episode of the Political Freedom Fighters Podcast. And today with me, I have a very special guest who is from the North Carolina Forward Party. And with that being said, I want to introduce to all of you Lennie Friedman. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Appreciate you having me on.
You're welcome. Anyways, the first question I gotta ask is, we want to know who you are. Who are you and what do you do?
Sure. As you said, my name is Lennie Friedman. I'm on the executive committee of the Forward Party. I've got a background in business. So for the past 6 to 8 years, I've been managing small businesses here in North Carolina. Prior to that, I was with big businesses, Lord Corporation based out of Cary, North Carolina, now owned by Parker Hannifin. And before that, John Deere, which I joined right after business school. Before then, I had a very different background. So I went to Duke University, played football. From Duke, I went to the NFL and played 10 years in the NFL as an offensive lineman. And just great experiences. From there, transitioned to the business world.
That is pretty awesome. That's pretty great. With that being said, the next question I want to talk about is, what's the history of the North Carolina Forward Party?
Sure. Well, the Forward Party in general was founded by Andrew Yang in about 2020. North Carolina Forward Party came into existence in 2022. We now are led by Patrick Newton, who's the CEO of the Forward Party here in North Carolina. And it's essentially a centrist organization that wants to give voice to the middle 70-80% of this country that's not far left or far right.
All right. That was pretty quick. Okay, anyways, why did you join the Forward Party?
So I think it's very specific to what I said, right? I think a lot of people feel politically homeless right now, right? If you're not on the far left of the spectrum, you don't feel like you have a home in the Democratic Party. If you're not on the far right of the spectrum, you don't feel like you have a home in the Republican Party. So there's a huge percentage of the voting population that feels homeless. And we want an organization that is founded to speak to them, to speak to that middle 70-80%. And a lot of the significant platforms that the Forward Party is focused on is how we can ensure that politics work for the voters and not the other way around, not voters working for the politicians. So what are some of the major ways that the Forward Party is looking to address that? Well, a big topic that's out there today is gerrymandering. Right? And the topic started with Texas doing a mid-decade census revision and looking to gerrymander the state of Texas. California then said, well, hey, if you're going to do it, we're going to do it. And that's not in the benefit of any of the voters. The voters don't want that. I mean, it's clear across the board voters don't want gerrymandering. Yet both the Democratic and Republican parties, when in power, default to gerrymandering. And what that is that's not voters picking politicians, that's politicians picking voters. So the Forward Party is very strong against that. Another example of how we can ensure that government works for the voters is by instituting term limits, right? We should not have career politicians. We should not have a senator elected in their mid-30s or mid-40s and still be there in their 80s. Presidents in the United States have term limits. There should be term limits across the board. So the Forward Party is a big supporter of that, not only in our home state of North Carolina, but in the country as a whole. And then I think the third platform that we really talk about is ensuring that you have majority vote winners for our politicians. North Carolina is one of the worst states in the country in terms of the minimum requirement to be elected as a politician. So in a primary, whether it's Republican primary or Democratic primary, all you need is about a third of the vote to win. If you get a third of the vote and you're the highest vote getter, you win. What does that mean? That means that 70% of the voting population might not want you as their elected official. So we need to change that. And there's ways to change that to ensure that you have to have 50% plus one of the vote to be an elected official. And that's really important to the Forward Party.
All right, that's actually pretty good. So before we go over the platform, I do gotta say, although you don't have your party doesn't have a lot of policies on your website, the policies that you do have are extremely detailed. Like, holy cow! Why so detailed?
Because one of the things that we are always gonna to really focus on is how do we make government and politicians work for the voters. And to do that, there's just a few main things you've got to change to make sure that politicians have the right incentives. So we are very detailed in what we want to see accomplished. And the three things I mentioned, ending gerrymandering, term limits for politicians, and 50% plus one majority vote are the things that we think really changes the political dynamic we have in our country. So we have great detail on those things.
All right, that's pretty awesome. So before we go over the policies, I've noticed on the website you guys have like the Ford formula, which I'm going to read the sentence that I have seen based on your website. The Ford formula is our data-driven, solution-focused framework designed to empower candidates to run on issues important to their constituents while advocating for solutions that represent a consensus.
Long story short, we want to have solutions that the middle 70 to 80% of this country want, right? You'll hear Donald Trump talk a lot about 80-20 issues, and it's a great comment. Like, we want to be for that 80% middle of the country. Now, we can disagree what some of the 80-20 issues are, but that's really where the Forward Party is focused, right? Not the extremes of the left and right, but what the middle percent of this country wants. And that's a huge percent of the voting public.
All right, that's pretty good. So, all right, I'm going to start pulling up the policies. Hold on, I'm going to need to exit this out. All right, I'm going to be...
You're not, and I'm not going to be expert on all the policies, so I'll just say that up front.
It's all right. So, with that being said, I guess the first thing we're going to go over is a little bit about your election reform. So, I'm going to be reading what I'm seeing with the election reform and problem, and then I'll go into like further detail on this. All right, on the page that says our priorities, it mentions two things. It mentions election reform and K through 12 education, which I'll be reading both of these. But I'll first start off with the shorthand paragraph before I go on to the more details on this. Election reform. North Carolina's electoral system faces mounting pressure for reform. A growing body of evidence drawn from public opinion polling and data analysis underscores a widespread loss of confidence in election fairness, declining voter engagement, entrenched partisanship, and structural barriers that exclude unaffiliated and third-party voters. Facts. That is very true. With unaffiliated voters now the largest voting bloc in the state, but still lacking full representation, and over 25% of voters expressing little to no confidence in North Carolina's voting processes, ain't that the truth? Urgent action is needed to restore trust, expand representation, and ensure electoral integrity.
So you want me to talk about that?
Yeah.
So it's a great leeway because that's exactly what I mentioned with our three pillars, right? So how can you have confidence that your vote matters if your district is gerrymandered, right? So and North Carolina has been brought to courts because of gerrymandering. So if take any area in North Carolina, it's likely not going to be 80 or 90% Democratic or 80, 90% Republican. There's a high likelihood in a very purple state that your area is 60% one, 40% of the other. And we're not seeing that in our elected officials. I mean, take Wake County as an example, and Wake County is on the Democratic side. Probably 40% of Wake County is Republican, yet the vast majority of our elected officials are Democratic. Why? Because the system is rigged that way. So if that's the case, and you know that 40% of your county is not Democratic and you don't see any representation, you're going to get disenfranchised, right? North Carolina has absolutely had a history of gerrymandering. And what that means is the voters don't feel like their vote really matters. They feel like the system is stacked against them, that the elections are rigged, because it doesn't matter how they vote, the politicians have selected their voters. So that's one great example. The second example we talked on already. In North Carolina, we have one of the lowest requirements to be an elected official. 33%, a third of the voting population is all you need to win your primary. And it's happened multiple times. This is not just theoretical. I mean, we can pull up the data. It happens every time there's an election cycle. So what does that mean? It means a candidate can win with almost 70% of the electorate not wanting that person. That makes no sense. One of the lowest in the country. That needs to change. And then finally, we do have career politicians. We have people that have been in the North Carolina House and Senate for far too long. Why are there not term limits? When there's term limits on being the governor, there's term limits on being the president of the United States. There absolutely needs to be term limits within the House and Senate of the North Carolina Congress.
All right, that's pretty good. With that being said, we're going to go over a little bit more detail on election reform, and we're going to be going over the problem, the voter consensus, and policy recommendations. The problem: 1. Declining confidence and participation. 22% of North Carolinians are not at all confident in election fairness. Over 25% have little to no confidence in state election processes. Primary election turnout remains critically low, 28% in presidential primaries, 16% in non-presidential primaries. This low engagement disproportionately amplifies the voices of party extremes, pushing more polarized candidates into general elections and narrowing voter choice.
Yeah, so the narrowing of voter choice is really, really important to the Forward Party. So in North Carolina, you have to get 15,000 signatures to be able to run for an election. And when you get those signatures, it's quite often, and it's happened recently with the Green Party in North Carolina, that those signatures are contested. And the major parties, whether Democratic or Republican, depending on whether or not they think it's in their favor or against their favor, do everything they can to prevent those parties from running an election. And therefore, voters don't feel like they have a choice, right? They don't feel that they get to choose anything but either the Democrat or Republican. And that's a problem. And what the Forward Party is trying to do by getting on the ballots is to give voters more choice. And I don't know why we have a system that is trying to prevent voters from having a choice. And let me just give you an example of what the Forward Party has to do to get 15,000 signatures. Each individual paper has to be from one county. So you have to have one piece of paper, and only signatures from people in that county can be on this particular piece of paper. Then you need another piece of paper. The papers have to be mailed in. Nothing can be done digitally. Nothing can be done with any type of 21st century technology. It is extremely slow. It is extremely contested, and it makes no sense. Like, why are we putting up these major roadblocks to get a political party? That doesn't mean voters are going to vote for them. That doesn't mean they'll be successful. But we should certainly be trying to make it easier to give ballot access to political parties. I mean, there's so many documents that you and I sign on a daily basis that's done digitally. We want it to be safe. We want it to be secure. We want absolutely to confirm that people are who they say they are. But there's better ways than paper and pen and literally having to have people sign their names in front of people on a singular piece of paper for that county. Why can't it be done digitally, like so many of what we do day to day is? It's just one example where hurdles are being put in front of political parties from giving voters more choice.
Yeah, and in fact, I think after this episode is done, I do want to send you some stuff that is going on. For those that do not know, the Rules Review Commission will be holding a public hearing on August 28th, starting at 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And one of the things that will be discussed about is the ongoing changes in the petitioning process that are going to make it harder for third parties to get on the ballot. And I have been informing third parties about this over the past few months, including some members of the Forward Party. And Lennie, I'm going to make sure to send you all the information that I've gotten. And trust me, I have been working on this. The Veterans Party is aware of this. The We the People Party is aware of this. The Constitution Party is aware of this. The Libertarians. I know for a fact the Greens are aware of it, and I know the Socialists are as well. And I know some members of the Forward Party are aware of this as well. And I'll make sure to give you up to speed on that.
That'd be great, and I'd like to dig into why that is the case, right? So why is it that the entrenched political parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, don't want to give voters more choice? The reason is because if there's more choice, and the way our elections work, there's a potential to split the ballot, right? So let's give an example. Let's give an historical example, right? So we don't need to touch on any current politics, but historically there was a well-known presidential election between George H.W. Bush, Ross Perot, and Bill Clinton. Okay, Ross Perot was one of the most successful third-party candidates in American history. And what happened? Well, there wasn't a clear winner. I'll take that back. There was certainly a clear winner in the election. But what happened was Ross Perot took a significant percentage of the votes. Let's say 20% of the vote. And George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton split roughly 40% each of the vote. Bill Clinton winning out. Well, what occurred is the Republicans felt that Ross Perot took votes away from the Republican candidate, and if Ross Perot wasn't there, George H.W. Bush would have beaten Bill Clinton. That is up for debate. I don't know the outcome, what the outcome would have been without Ross Perot, but what I do know is that concern of splitting the votes is the reason that major political parties don't want to allow third parties into the race. We can give you another example. A few years later in a presidential election, between Al Gore and the son of H.W. Bush, George W. Bush. And there was a very contested election in Florida. And there was a third-party candidate in Florida named Ralph Nader. Ralph Nader took a small percentage of the vote, let's say 2% of the vote, roughly speaking. In the great state of Florida, with millions of votes, George Bush ended up winning a contested election with about 600 votes. And the Democrats felt that Ralph Nader split the vote from Al Gore, and if Ralph Nader wasn't there, Al Gore would have won the presidential election. So both parties point to those things as splitting the votes. So therefore, they are very concerned with allowing third parties to enter politics and potentially pull away from their voting base. That's because of the way we have our current system. But it's not the only way it has to do. That's not the only election system we can have. There's an election system called ranked choice voting, an election reform called ranked choice voting that is currently used by about 16 to 18 million Americans and millions of people around the world. What ranked choice voting does is it eliminates the possibility of a split vote. Because instead of just choosing one candidate, you get to rank your candidates. My first choice, second choice, second choice, and third choice. As many choices as are running if that's what you want to do, but you don't have to vote for all of them. And that's really not a complicated thought process, right? If you and your spouse, your wife, whatever, are going out to dinner and you're debating where to go, one person might want burgers, one person might want burritos, one person might want pizza, right? You rank choices all the time. What's your first choice, second choice, third choice, and what makes everybody, what gives most people their closest number one choice? That's all ranked choice voting is, right? We choose all the time. So in ranked choice voting, what would happen is if three people ran an election, let's use what we discussed earlier, Ross Perot, Bill Clinton, and George H.W. Bush, right? Those who wanted George H.W. Bush as their number one candidate, that's their choice. They can then vote for their second choice. Maybe it's Ross Perot. So let's say it's their second choice. Those that wanted Ross Perot as their number one, they vote for Ross Perot. But then they get a choice of who's their second preference. And let's just say it's George H.W. Bush. So what would happen if they use ranked choice voting in that process? After the first round, Ross Perot would have had the lowest amount of votes. So Ross Perot's votes Ross Perot would have been removed from the election, and you would have had an instant runoff. Same thing that happens in runoff elections we have all the time. Now in reality, what happens is everybody theoretically goes back to the ballot box. If George H.W. Bush was your first choice, he's still there. He's your number one. If Bill Clinton was your first choice, he's still there. He's your number one. So if Ross Perot's no longer there, those people get their second choice pulled forward. And if their second choice was H.W. Bush, he gets their votes. You run the instant runoff, just like a normal everyday runoff would be, and then you find out which candidate truly has a majority support from the voters. That's ranked choice voting. That would absolutely eliminate the spoiler effect, and something we should certainly look to implementing here in North Carolina.
I agree with you. Next up, I guess we already talked about it, but I guess I'll just go over it real quick. 2. A broken two-party system. Public dissatisfaction is exacerbated by a rigid two-party system that limits political representation, fuels polarization and tribalism, hinders effective governance, encourages echo chambers that reinforce division.
So I'm going to go back to something we've talked about a few times already because I think it's really important. So in a primary in North Carolina, you can win a primary by 33% of the vote, right? So in primaries, which are typically have much lower voter turnout than a general. So in primaries, it's typically supported by the most extreme and fervent supporters of that primary. So for Democrats, it would be the most extreme Democratic voters. For Republicans, the most extreme Republican voters. In North Carolina, you only need 33% of the vote to win. So if you have the most extreme and 33% voting, you get and a candidate can win with 33% of the vote. You have a very small percentage of that primary voting, of voters in that primary voting, and they only need a very small percent of their support for a candidate to win. Right? So you have a primary with extremely low turnout, and with that low turnout, only 33% of those voters are needed to elect an official. So what do you have? You have the extreme of that party being elected. Where in a primary, forget third party, forget the general, just in a primary, if you required an elected official to get 50% of the vote plus one vote, then you'd be sure that at least for that primary, 50%, a majority of the voters in that primary wanted that candidate. So that's where you could have ranked choice voting in a primary, nothing to do with the general, nothing to do with presidential, but just in primaries in North Carolina, that would require 50% plus one of the electorate supports that candidate. To me, that's the first place I would start, and is an absolutely no-brainer for ranked choice voting in North Carolina.
I agree. Next up, another thing we've already talked about so far, gerrymandering and careerism. North Carolina is considered one of the most gerrymandered states. Non-competitive districts dilute voter influence and violate the principle of one person, one vote. Congressional careerism has led to entrenchment and decreased responsiveness. Average tenure now 7.4 to 8.5 years versus 1.4 to 3.8 years in the 19th century. 14% of NC representatives have served nearly 20 years.
Yeah, so let's just talk about incentives, because incentives drive everything. If your incentive is to be a career politician, then what you're going to do is cast votes that keep you in power. Not cast votes because you think that's the right thing to do. Not cast votes against your party, even if you think it's the right thing to do. But you have to make sure that you have the support of your party, that you can get reelected, that you have enough fundraising coming in. So what that does is it incentivizes politicians not to act on principle, not to do what they think is right, but to do what they think gets them elected. And that's a problem. And when you have careerism and you have politicians that want to be in there for 5, 6, 7, 8 terms, they are much more focused on what they can do to stay elected rather than what they need to do for the people of North Carolina and for what is right for a particular piece of legislation. With term limits, that gets eliminated. Because whether it's a limit of 1 term or 2 terms, at the end of their term, they know that they've got no other chance of being reelected. They're going to vote their conscience. They're going to vote their principles. And that's what's really important. And if you look at a national level, the amount of elected officials that go against their party after they've announced their retirement dwarfs the amount of elected officials that go against their party when they're running for reelection. To me, it's a no-brainer. It's one of the simplest things we can implement. The president has term limits. The governor has term limits. Why shouldn't the House and Senate have term limits? Make it so that the elected officials are incentivized to vote for principle, incentivized to vote for their conscience, not to vote to get reelected.
All right. 4. Barriers to representation. Unaffiliated voters now make up 38% of registered voters, let's go, outnumbering both major parties, yet remain underrepresented in government. Ain't that the truth? Third-party candidates face onerous signature requirements and high retention thresholds, compounded by allegations of intimidation, board interference, and expensive litigation. Ain't that the truth?
Why are we making it so complicated, right? And again, it all goes back to the incentive. So because of the concern of splitting votes, right? The entrenched parties don't want to allow a third party candidate that could potentially steal votes in a contested election, right? So it doesn't matter what side it is, right? There's officials that are part of a third party or potential elected officials part of third parties that potentially draw votes away from the Republican Party or potentially draw votes away from the Democratic Party. So whoever fears that vote splitting are going to do everything they can to prevent the third party from getting ballot access. So if we change the voting structure to something like ranked choice voting, you eliminate that split the vote issue. So then the Democrats and Republicans aren't going to waste time trying to prevent a third party candidate from running because there is no splitting the vote that they've got to be concerned with, right? So that's one. If you do that, you remove their incentive to fight a third party. Taking that aside, the system is what it is. Why are we making it so hard to get signatures, right? With things like DocuSign and sign requests and all these digital signatures, we can very easily prove if a person is the person they say they are, right? Does their name and address match their driver's license? Can they upload a picture of their driver's license and sign saying, yes, this is me, this is my driver's license, and do it all digitally instead of having to get everything on pen and paper, limiting which counties, only one county per piece of paper instead of at, say, a great event like the Lazy Days festivals in Cary, where you have people from different counties signing on one piece of paper. You have to make sure that they're on different pieces of paper. Why are we making this so complicated? Why is this back in the 1920s when nobody heard of computers? We have computers. We have safe ways to sign documents. Require a driver's license for proof. Fine. But make it so that third parties have a much easier right to run for elected office.
I agree. So, next up, we're going to go to... Oh, did you need to say something?
No, please continue.
All right. Next up is voter consensus. Recent polling indicates a bipartisan appetite for reform. 65% support ending gerrymandering, 73% support congressional term limits, 40% support ranked choice voting, with 34% open to learning more, 83% are concerned about counties lacking the resources to properly run elections, and 76% believe the nation is more politically divided than ever before.
I think there's no question that this nation is more politically divided than ever before. And I think it's going to continue to do so the way we have our primaries. Again, it goes back to primaries have very low turnout. And in North Carolina specifically, you only need 33% of the vote to win. So what's going to happen? You are going to get more and more extreme candidates. You're going to have this country splitting apart. We need to change those incentives. And again, I will happily talk about ranked choice voting all day long, but that's just one option. Another option, and one that not everybody, a vast majority of American voters support, is the end of gerrymandering. I mean, gerrymandering is plain and simple. The elected officials in power, and I can give you examples of Democrats and Republicans, that it's absolutely a bipartisan issue, picking their voters instead of voters picking the politicians. So they make these absolutely asinine maps that are to maximize the Republicans, if they're in power, to keep and gain more Republican seats. The Democrats, if they're in power, to gain and take more Democratic seats. And we can give countless examples. Maryland is gerrymandered for Democrats. North Carolina is gerrymandered for Republicans. California is gerrymandered for Democrats. Texas is gerrymandered for Republicans. These are not things that are up for debate. They are clear. Illinois is absolutely gerrymandered for Democrats. Why do we have this? We have fantastic computer modeling capabilities. We have consulting firms throughout the country that can come in as a nonpartisan basis and just really simplify how our districts are drawn. And it should have absolutely nothing to do with the political affiliation. It should be population-based. It should be contiguous districts. But take the politics out of it and let voters speak their will. That's what voters want. They just want to feel like their vote matters, that they're not pre-selected, so it doesn't matter what they do. This is a no-brainer that, and I forgot the exact statistic you came up with, but far greater than 60% of Americans want to end gerrymandering. And it will, at the end of the day, It'll take gerrymandering away from Democratic states, take gerrymandering away from Republican states. This absolutely terrible debate we're having now between, hey, if Texas is going to do it, California is going to do it, and California did it first, or New Jersey did it first, or North Carolina. There should be none of it. Like this is a 80-20 discussion. There's no way. The only people that want gerrymandering are people that just want to take the choice away from voters. It is no question one of the easiest things we should be doing.
I agree. All right, next up is expanding representation. Nonpartisan open primaries allows all voters to participate and promote moderate candidates. Instead of runoff/ranked choice voting, like we've talked about before, empower voters to rank candidates and reduce negative campaigning. Accessible ballot access. Modifying signature requirements and reduce retention thresholds for third parties.
Yeah, so again, the more choice thing, what drives more choice is certainly ranked choice voting and ballot access. They're not the only ways, right? There are other ways, but it's a great example to talk through. And, one of the pushbacks on ranked choice voting is it's complicated, right? Well, now I've got to rank multiple candidates and it's going to make the ballot more confusing, the ballot bigger. I mean, come on. So first off, there's like 18 million Americans that are already doing it. Ranked choice voting is used throughout the world, including Ireland, including Australia. The U.S. military does it currently today in the South for overseas ballot casting. We rank choices all the time. I probably didn't do a great job explaining the example of choosing between different restaurants, but when you have a bunch of people coming together and you got to choose where to go for dinner, everybody's going to rank their choices, right? Well, my number one's, burgers. My number two's, someone says I want pizza. Someone says I want burritos. You come to a consensus and try to get something that the vast majority of people in your group want to go for dinner. That's ranked choice voting, right? There's people going to have first choice, but there's people that might not be their first choice, but that other candidate, yeah, they're pretty close. I'm interested in them. If I can't have my first choice, I'll have my second choice. But that candidate over there, I definitely don't want, so you're not going to rank them at all. And at the end of the day, what you have is you have a candidate that's elected with 50% plus one majority vote. And most of the times with ranked choice voting, it's a much higher percentage that support that candidate, right? They might not be everybody's first choice, but they're their second choice. And what does that do for incentives? So right now, our politics is all about not how good I am, but I'm going to tell you how bad the other person is. Right? Those people over there are terrible. Don't elect them. They'll do a terrible job. I'm the only real choice. You might not love me, but I'm the only real choice. With ranked choice voting, you change that conversation because now you're not only worried about being someone's number one choice and only worried about securing your base. Now you want to be someone's second choice or third choice. So the conversation changes. So now it's not they all suck. It's, look, if I'm not your first choice, and I hope to be your first choice, let me tell you where I agree with some of the things they're doing. I'm not going to agree with everything. But candidate B over there, we align on a lot of things. So if they're your first choice, I'd like to be your second choice. So it changed the whole conversation in our campaign. It's not just mudslinging. It's not saying why those 5 or 6 candidates suck. It's, hey, I'd like to be your first choice. And you know what? If I'm not, and candidate B or C is your first choice, I've got a lot of things in common with them. Not everything. Here's where we disagree. But I'm pretty aligned with candidate B and C on these few things. So if they're your first choice, I'd want to be your second. Changes. And it's not just my theory, right? Ranked choice voting has been around for 100 years. There's lots of documentation about this. You can go to Fair Vote. You can go to Rank the Vote. You can go to North Carolina's own Kinston homegrown ranked choice voting resource center, right? So people don't know that. In Kinston, North Carolina, a very close neighbor of ours, they've got a national organization called the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center. Read what they have to say. These things are proven. These are not theoretical things about ranked choice voting. It changes the tenor of campaigning. It gives voters more choice. This is what we need in North Carolina.
I agree with you.
Sorry, that's Siri. I'm speaking to her.
That's all right. Next up is restoring trust and participation, maintaining early and absentee voting, preserve and protect early in-person and absentee voting options to ensure flexibility and access for all voters. Election Day holiday, increase turnout through guaranteed access. Accessible voter ID, implement fair ID laws without disenfranchisement. Campaign finance, transparency, and voter education. Bolster public trust through openness and informed participation. Post-election audits. Establishing a requirement for the state auditor's office to conduct independent post-election audits to evaluate the integrity and effectiveness of election procedures, ensuring accountability, accuracy, and public confidence in the electoral process. And finally, support for election staff. Improve administration capacity and prevent resource shortages.
Yeah, so let's talk about the elephant in the room, right? There's people that are concerned about election integrity, right? And that's a concern that people have, and we need to address it. We can't pretend like that concern doesn't exist. We can't pretend that that concern is not valid. So how do we address it? And you mentioned a lot of different ways, and there are a lot of great ways. I think an election day holiday is a fantastic idea. Right. So if you're a working parent, it's really hard to get to the ballot box in the middle of the week. Right. You've got obligations for your job. You can't just necessarily take off and go vote. If you've got kids, it's tough to go on the weekend because your kids might be playing soccer or basketball or football or whatever it is. A national holiday would make it so that everyone knows they have a day they can go. Right. And I think we've got too many holidays in this country. I think we have holidays for everything under the sun. And really, this is one of the most important things you can have a holiday for. So I'm very, very supportive of that. A voter ID, I've got no problem with, right? Like, we need an ID to drive. You need an ID to do a lot of things. So having a voter ID, I think, is something that we can certainly get done and accomplish. Let's just not make it onerous. Like, let's make it accessible to people. Let's have nonprofit organizations that help people get their legitimate voter ID if they don't have a driver's license. But that doesn't bother me. That will give people confidence that their votes are what they voted for. So I think we've got to acknowledge that there's concern over voter integrity, and let's do things to improve it.
I agree with you. And next we got the policy guardrails. While we do not impose a litmus test on our candidates, our policy recommendations are designed to serve as a resource, providing accessible, consensus-driven solutions that candidates can reference throughout their campaigns. These recommendations reflect strong membership support and are intended to streamline alignment around practical reforms. If candidates choose not to adopt the recommended policy in full or in part, they are still expected to advance solutions that fall within our established guardrails. This ensures that their platforms remain solution-focused and do not contribute to divisive or polarizing narratives that hinder progress and public trust. All policy proposals have been verified through a consensus threshold of 68% or higher among the membership. So I guess we're going to go over the left guardrails first, and then we'll go over the right guardrails. Left guardrail, access. No policy can undermine election security measures. Education. Election education is limited to essential nonpartisan information that supports participation and stays within the budget. Fairness. Voting policies must be justified by concrete legal foundations or rigorous replicable studies. Do you want me to finish reading the right guardrails, or do you want to respond?
Yeah, no, please go. I think it's good. I think it's good to get the information out there. So please continue reading.
All right. Right guardrail. Security. No policy can result in an undue invasion of voter privacy. Stewardship. Election programs must be cost-effective and must not compromise voter education or participation. Eligibility. No policy should create significant barriers or undue burdens for citizens to vote.
Yeah, so what I really appreciate about the Forward Party is we don't ask people that support the Forward Party that they have to fit in this very narrow box that the Forward Party determines, right? So you'll see that a lot today in our politics, where if you don't align completely with what the candidate that's the head of the party is saying, then you're not really part of that party. So first off, that is the opposite of what the Forward Party believes, right? We certainly have general policy ideas. Like, if you're for gerrymandering and anti-term limits, then you're probably not a Forward Party candidate. But other than that, there's a lot of solutions that the middle 80% of this country would support, and we're just looking for candidates to be in the middle of those solutions. So when it comes to some of the policies you discussed, we certainly don't want voter integrity to be so burdensome that it prevents people from wanting to vote or getting access to vote. That said, we can't have it so open that there aren't really checks and balances to who's voting. So we want common sense solutions, right? Some of the things we already talked about, like a voter holiday, so that it enables people to get to the ballots and vote without having to miss work, without having to miss soccer games and those types of things. And yeah, having some type of voter ID is certainly something that's within the middle 80%. There's lots of people in this country that support it. We just can't make it too onerous, right? So find that common sense ground. So the forward party is not going to dictate exactly what candidates have to support. We just want them within the guide rails, and I think that's really common sense stuff.
All right, we got all the election reform out of the way. Next up, we're going to talk about K-12 education. K-12 education in North Carolina has become a critical issue due to multiple factors. Debates over funding, with concerns about underfunded public schools and competing priorities for school choice, initiatives like charter schools and vouchers have raised concerns about exacerbating inequality across the state. Teacher pay and shortages have led to protests as salaries remained uncompetitive with neighboring states. Disparities in educational outcomes, highlighted by the long-running Leandro case, continue to reflect struggles to provide equitable education, especially in rural and underserved urban areas. Additionally, curriculum content around social issues has sparked political debates with concerns about ideological agendas in schools. The COVID-19 pandemic further strained the system, intensifying learning loss and polarizing discussions about student health and mental well-being.
Yeah, you went out towards the last half of that, so I think for your listeners, it'd be good to review the last half of that. You kind of went silent after COVID-19.
Oh, shoot, I'm sorry. The COVID-19 pandemic further strained the system, intensifying learning loss and polarizing discussions about student health and mental well-being. Were you able to get that?
Yeah, so I got the part about mental health and well-being. So my kids are all Wake County public school kids. So all three of my kids went through Millbrook High School. My oldest child, who just graduated UNC Chapel Hill, which we're all very, very proud of, even though I went to Duke. We let that slide. She was in the middle of high school during COVID, and it had a significant impact, right? And I think the school shutdowns and kids being stuck at home is going to impact a lot of kids for a long time. And it's unfortunate. And it gets exacerbated, in my opinion, by these things. By cell phones, and our kids being on cell phones, all the time, and less reading like when you and I were growing up, more quick hits of TikTok and Instagram and those type of apps. So I think those are compounding problems, and I think the data is showing that that's really impacted this current generation of students. So it's absolutely something we need to address. And some of those solutions are certainly bringing in more teachers, increasing teacher pay, so we make it more competitive, which we recently have done. And I'm very proud to see that done by the North Carolina legislators. So we have started increasing pay, and I'd like to do that more. So these are things that I think a vast majority of voters can get behind, ensuring that we've got access to good education. We're never going to be able to ensure equal outcomes, but we certainly want to ensure equal opportunity. And we want to ensure a good opportunity for all students to get a good education, to have them focus on, my opinion, a lot of the STEM classes, so science, technology, engineering, and math, and making sure they have that great foundation as their primary responsibility to schools. And it shouldn't be focused on too many other things if STEM is not the primary and that baseline is not nailed down for students that have great careers, whether it's a trade career, going the route of a community college or going the route of a four-year college. We want to make sure they have the fundamentals really strong before we worry about anything else.
All right. Now we're going to go over the problem with K through 12 education, which is divided into three parts. 1. Declining confidence and quality in public education. 47% of North Carolinians believe public education is headed in the wrong direction, while 29% believed it's headed in the right direction. 48% of voters are dissatisfied with the quality of education in their local schools. Parents are concerned about growing ideological influence. Over 70% agree that classrooms have been more politicized. Nearly 50% agree that teachers push personal beliefs in the classroom. Yep, I've been there. North Carolinians give their local schools a C+ in handling the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, so what does it tell you when 70% of the electorate feel that the school system has been over politicized, right? You know, whether you want to call it an 80-20 issue or 70-30 issue, clearly it's an issue, right? So how do we address that? I'll go back to my statement on STEM. I think we have to focus on the fundamentals, right? Science, technology, engineering, and math. You can put reading in there clearly as well, but you can't do those others if you can't read. But let's prepare our kids for a successful future, right? It doesn't matter what field you're in, right? If you go in and do something great in trades such as an electrician or a plumber or HVAC, you're going to need that foundation in science, technology, engineering, and math. Like that, it's going to be a requirement. If you want to be successful in engineering by going to a great school like NC State, or you want to get into life sciences at Duke or UNC, that's all going to be focused on STEM careers. You want to get politicalization out of our schools. You want to get people's ideology out of our schools. And let's really focus on those STEM classes and reading. And that will take care of itself.
Fair enough. Okay, second part, unequal and underfunded system. 65% of voters believe public schools are underfunded. Teacher salaries remain uncompetitive, contributing to shortages. 78% believe teachers deserve a raise beyond the 3% currently scheduled. 82% says teachers should earn as much as comparably educated professionals. 55% believe North Carolina teachers are paid too little. The Leandro case continues to highlight systemic inequities in access to a sound basic education, especially in rural and underserved urban communities.
Yeah, so we certainly want to keep our eye on teachers being overworked, right? So teachers that have 30, 35 kids in a classroom, they're not going to be effective at what they do. So we certainly want to make sure there's enough teachers in the rural communities, enough teachers in the urban communities to ensure a teacher-to-student ratio is manageable, because obviously the bigger the classes, the tougher it is to give individual attention. Teacher pay should be raised. I mean, I believe that the market dictates what teacher salary should be. And if we're not competitive, we're going to lose teachers to Texas or Virginia or Maryland or other states. So I think that's how we should have a lens on what teacher salary should be. I don't really know what it means to have teacher salaries based on comparably educated people. It's tough to compare jobs across industries. But within the industry of teaching, how do our salaries compare to different states? I think is a really good way to look at it. And I do think teachers deserve competitive salaries.
Fair enough. Okay, third part of the problem. Safety, mental health, and student support. 73% of North Carolinians believe school safety is the top issue for state government to address. 80% agree that youth mental health needs significantly more dedicated resources. The COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated learning loss and mental health challenges, exposing weaknesses in student support systems and further polarizing educational debates.
Yeah, so this is a topic of debate now with schools requiring students put their phones away, which as a parent I'm supportive of. I think the phones are a detriment to our students' mental health. It's a negative in their education. It prevents them from learning how to read complex prose and really dig into complex issues because everything is such a quick fix. That said, because of certainly an increase in school shooting over the past several decades, parents are concerned that what if there's this mass casualty event? What if there's a school shooting and my kid doesn't have a phone? How are they going to reach out to me? It's certainly a very legitimate concern. So how do we address that concern? How do we get away from the increasing in mass casualties, mass shootings? It is not an easy answer. And if there was an easy answer, I think we would have come to it already. I certainly think red flag laws are really important. I certainly think we want to encourage students and parents to notice if they see fellow students or their own children or children of other parents that are exhibiting, risky behavior or talking about guns or violence, that we want to communicate that. And certainly we don't want to foster a society of, big brother watching you and everyone telling on everyone else. But some of these students that do clearly have mental health issues, that are being bullied at school or that have made comments that call into question whether or not they're considering using a weapon out of school, we certainly want to flag that. We want to take those risks seriously. We want to try to get to the bottom if it is a risk, but there's no sugarcoating it. I mean, this is not an easy problem to solve because it's only after the fact that people can really point to, oh, we should have seen the signs. So I don't have a great answer for it, but I certainly agree that it's a concern and parents are right to be concerned about it, and we need to find solutions.
All right, before I continue going on with the voter consensus, I gotta know. I see there has been quite a few mentions about the Leandro case, and I'm actually not familiar with that case. So what is the Leandro case?
Yeah, you'd have to have someone different than me on here to discuss. I'm not an expert either in it, and so I would not do it justice.
I understand. Anyways, next up is the voter consensus. Recent polling indicates strong public support for reform across key areas. 65% say schools are underfunded, 78% support greater raises for teachers, 82% want pay parity for teachers with similarly educated workers, 73% rank school safety as the top education issue, and 80% support expanding youth mental health services.
Yeah, so I think we've addressed a lot of those, right? So I'm certainly very supportive of competitive pay for teachers. I think you want to compare that within the industry, right? So equally educated between a teacher and another industry is a tough comparison to make because the jobs are different. Doesn't make them better or worse, but the jobs are different. So I'd like to see teacher pay competitive to states like Virginia, states like Maryland, states like Texas. How are we doing compared to these high growth states and ensuring that we can attract great teachers? Mental health for sure is something we want. We want to have access for our student population. So we want to make it very easy without any stigma for students to raise their hand and ask for help, and make sure we have enough mental health professionals there to support them. And when it comes to additional funding for schools, I don't want to just throw money at things. I don't think that's a solution. But show me where the money can benefit the schools, benefit the students, be very targeted. I think we should absolutely have those discussions. I can say as a parent of 3 kids that went through Millbrook High School, and I can only speak through my example, I've been very happy with Millbrook High School. I think it's been a great experience for my kids. I would gladly you send them back to Millbrook High School. So for the parents that are not feeling, that their school system was someplace they'd resend their kids, let's find out why and how can we get more kids to be like Millbrook High School, or more schools to be like Millbrook High School.
All right, fair enough. Policy recommendations. There seems to be 3. Grounded in member consensus, all right? The following solutions are proposed. All right, first policy recommendation, student-centered learning. Student-centered curriculum implement personalized and project-based. All right, sorry, let me reread that. Student-centered curriculum. Implement personalized and project-based learning that fosters core academic skills, creativity, and adaptability. Equal access to foundational resources. Ensure all students, regardless of zip code, receive the materials and support necessary for a sound basic education. Diverse learning opportunities. Provide pathways for both college preparation and career readiness.
Yeah, so we talked about that, right? Like, so how do we provide students with the education to give them a chance for a successful career? And successful careers are there's not a cookie cutter answer to what a successful career is. It is very dependent on the individual, but no career is not going to need the basic building blocks of education, right? Certainly reading, and then the STEM courses that we talked about. So if I could wave a magic wand, I would make sure that every kid coming out of a North Carolina high school is very well grounded in the core academic studies of reading, science, technology, engineering, and math. I know I'm going to sound like a broken record and people are going to get bored by it, but that's the foundation of just about any career, right? Whether it's a career in a trade, a career in life sciences, whether you're a doctor, a nurse, you're going to need those foundational educational trainings. And so that's where I would focus. And yes, access to proper materials. No kid should go to school short of the basic materials for learning, right? And I don't think that we should require parents to have to send their kids to school with, supplies for the classroom. I think if they can, that's great. And if they can add to the minimum level, terrific. But North Carolina schools should be able to provide the minimum level of resources needed to give the kids a good education.
All right. Next up, curriculum excellence and civic preparation. Rigorous standards. Prioritize literacy, numeracy, science, and civics with clear proficiency goals. Balance social studies. Encourage critical thinking through a balanced approach to historical and social topics. Character and practical skills development. Integrate ethics, emotional intelligence, and real-world applications into the curriculum. Restorative discipline. Promote accountability while providing second chances and supportive interventions.
So I think we talked a lot about that when I mentioned reading in STEM. The one thing that policy talks about that I didn't was civics. And I think that's important. So I certainly don't mean to discount that. And you can get there by focus on reading. But what civics is basically, in a nutshell, what physics is going to teach our youth is the importance of government and let me rephrase that, the importance of a system of government for a country, the importance of the history of the United States government and the Constitution, the importance of being a participant in your local community and local governments, the importance of knowing what your vote gets you and knowing what your vote doesn't get you and knowing what the incentives are in our system for politicians. A lot of things we talked about on this podcast. I think that's a big part of what civics is. I think knowing the history of the United States, the good, the bad, and the ugly is fantastic. I think a true reverence for the United States Constitution and its founding fathers is something that we should absolutely be teaching our children, and they should understand the why. Why do we have checks and balances of our government? Why is the legislative body supposed to be the primary amongst equals? I think that's really important, and civics can address that, and in so doing, really focus on reading with the students. So the only addition I can add to my STEM and reading comments is making sure that civics is part of it.
All right, fair enough. C, educator effectiveness and system efficiency. Parent-driven behavioral policies. Involve parents in defining and addressing student conduct. Top-tier talent recruitment. Attract exceptional teachers and industry professionals through competitive compensation and prestige. Teacher support. Expand professional development and leadership pathways for educators. Efficiency with impact. Promote cost-effective programs that yield measurable results in student outcomes.
Yeah, so that was a lot. I mean, that was a mouthful, but essentially it can boil down to some really basic concepts, right? We want to pay for good teachers. We want to be able to, have good teachers incentivized to stay, right? So that's more than just pay. That's the whole package: pay, benefits, lifestyle. But the flip side of that is we have to make sure that our teachers are performing and they're educating our students, and they're not just career teachers like there are career politicians, right? We want them there to do the right thing. So we have to have a way to make sure they are educating our students. And for teachers that are not doing a good job, have accountability for that. And that's true in every facet of life. It's true whether I was in as a professional athlete and every day I was judged for whether I'm doing good or bad. It's true in business. It's true in school, right? You have a grading curve. You have success and failures. You have people that are promoted and you have people that are fired. I think the same should hold true for teachers. So that's what this is saying. Pay for great teachers, pay for great talent, pay for teachers that are doing a wonderful job educating our children. But also, those that are not, they need to be shown the door if they're not successful.
Fair enough. Now it's time to go over the policy guardrails. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 left guardrails, 6 right guardrails, and we're going to read all of them. I'm going to read all of them, and you can respond. Left guardrail, creativity. No policy can promote unfocused programs or cultural bias in education. Equity. No policy can define equitable access beyond essential resources based on students' proven needs. Enrichment. No policy can compromise core learning objectives or a sound basic education to achieve curriculum balance. System. No policy can undermine academic performance or misuse public funding. Restorative. No policy can compromise safety, well-being, or accountability in balancing restorative and traditional disciplinary measures. Compensation. No policy can prioritize teacher compensation at the expense of accountability. Right guardrail. Standardization. No policy can undermine rigorous academic standards or misaligning funding. Equality. No policy can undermine equal opportunity to access diverse resources that support positive academic outcomes. Competency. No policy can prioritize a sound basic education that cultivates critical thinking and character development. Choice. No policy can support school choice that undermines transparency, academic rigor, or sustainable public education funding. Discipline. No policy can enforce disciplinary measures that neglect the balance between restorative practices and traditional approaches. Performance. No policy can base teacher compensation solely on student outcomes beyond the teacher's control.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of these are just common sense stuff, right? And that's why they're called guardrails. We're not trying to dictate every nuanced policy, right? That's an impossibility, and it's not something that can take into account local knowledge and individualization of North Carolina, but just common sense stuff, right? Like, we want teachers to be compensated for being good teachers. We want teachers and students to be accountable, right? We want our students that come out of our system to have the minimum basic education, right? They should be, I think the terms we had was literate both numerically and grammatically, right? So we want them to have the basic foundations so that they can be successful in whatever course they take. But none of these guardrails are too stringent. They're just common sense, middle of the road reforms that we want to look at.
All right. Now that we got your priorities over the way, I do got to ask, how is the party doing right now, and what is the North Carolina Ford Party doing?
Yeah, so we're doing actually really, really well. So we're in the process of getting ballot access. So we've already got thousands of signatures. We're well on our way to 15,000 signatures. We have an excellent fundraising campaign now where we can match donations up to a total of $15,000. And we've got tremendous support for that. I think we're already halfway towards our goal, actually more than halfway towards our goal. We've got forward-aligned politicians in North Carolina. A great example is Don Davis, who's out in the Pitt County area, represents one of my favorite towns in North Carolina, Little Washington. So we're building some really great momentum. Patrick Nunes has been great leadership of the Forward Party. I think we've got a long way to go, and just continuing to communicate to the voting public what the Forward Party is, what our goals are, and I try to keep it really simple, right? And one of our biggest things that we're trying to accomplish is incentivizing politicians, incentivizing government to work for the voters. And I'll go back to ending gerrymandering, having term limits, and ensuring that politicians are elected with 50% plus one of the vote. That's the message we're trying to get out there. I think what that does is ensure that politicians work for the voters and not the other way around, and ensure that politicians vote on principle, politicians vote for what they think is right for the voters, not what gets them elected.
That's pretty fair. Anyways, I know that your party has a YouTube channel, and I did watch one of the recent live streams where like you guys hosted like an event. I actually helped inform like Wayne Jones from the Constitution Party about this event, and although he wasn't like an original speaker, I've heard a couple of the original speakers didn't make it, so he ended up joining. So, do you have plans on like uploading more videos to your YouTube channel?
Absolutely. We're going to upload more video. We're going to continue to expand our social media reach. We're doing a lot of conversations with voters out in different cities, whether it's Durham, Raleigh, Wilmington, Charlotte, all across North Carolina.
Oh, shoot. Oh, shit. Oh, no, I lost my internet connection, guys. Oh, shit. I'll be right back. Holy cow.
James. Hey, James, I'm still here.
Hey, Lennie, are you here? I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. My internet suddenly just cut off.
Nah, no problem.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and repeat my question. Is there anything...
Okay.
How is the party... Do you have plans on uploading more videos on your YouTube channel? Continue where you left off.
Yeah, no problem. James, we're strongly committed to expanding our social media presence. That's true on YouTube, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Absolutely. I think it's a great way of getting the message out there. We're also very interested in expanding our in-person interaction. So there's been a lot of meet and greets. We've been at a lot of different events throughout North Carolina. One of my favorite events, anytime I can grab a beer and talk politics with people. So we like meeting at breweries. We did so in Durham towards the end of July. I think they've got an event out in Charlotte. And you can certainly come to our webpage to see all the local events. You can also feel free to contact us. And if you want a conversation over beer, I'm probably happy to meet you just about anywhere in the Triangle. So we're doing our best to get the word out there on what the Forward Party is, how we represent an alternative to the Democratic and Republican Party, and how you can help us get the 15,000 signatures to get ballot access.
All right, that is awesome. And with that being said, everyone, I want to thank Lennie for joining me here today. If you're all new to this podcast, feel free to hit the like button below if you enjoyed the video. Press the subscribe button, hit the notification bell if you're new. And I will be putting all the social media links of the North Carolina Forward Party in the description so that you all can check them out. And I would love for Lennie to come back, like maybe as a future guest at some point so we can talk about some of the other policies, if you don't mind.
Whenever you want, just let me know and I'll be there.
All right, that is awesome. With that being said, everyone, I hope you all enjoy and I'll see you all later. Peace.
Thanks, James.